Okay, so today we are going over solving compound and inequalities. And there are two types of compound ands. There is one where you have two separate inequalities joined with the word and. And then you have one where there are two inequalities in one sentence. And this is called a between type and. Now, you could rewrite this as 2 is less than 3x minus 1, and then write the word and. Then 3x minus 1 is less than 14. And then solve those as two separate inequalities. But we do not want you to do it that way. We want you to learn how to solve a between type and without breaking it and separating it into two parts. So I will not accept work if you break it into two parts. And that is how PhotoMath will show you. So please make sure if you're getting any tutoring that we do not want you to break it apart. So we want you to leave it just as is. So let me show you how to do those two problems. Okay, when you solve an and where there are two of them separated with an and, you're just going to solve the first one, and then you're going to solve the second one. So we're going to solve the first one. And remember, we want to undo adding 6 by subtracting 6. So we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. Positive 6 and a negative 6 zeros out, and that leaves you x is less than 4. And then we're going to solve the next one. Remember, if you're dividing by a negative 2, then shouldn't you multiply by a negative 2 to both sides? And remember, there's a reverse rule that says if you ever multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to remember to reverse the inequality. So that becomes x is greater than negative 8, and is part of your answer. So this is your entire answer. So if we were going to go and graph this, we're going to put negative 8 and 4, and then 0 is kind of over here somewhere, right? Put the key details. And we want all the numbers that are less than 4, but also greater than negative 8. And where they intersect is in the middle. So this is the solution, is in between negative 8 and 4, right? So we want where those two are going to crash and meet. And so that's the intersection point. So let's look at a second one. Okay, this one is a between style. And again, we do not want you to break apart. We want you to learn how to solve them simultaneously. So some kids like to draw a little dashed line down each inequality, right? Because we have an inequality statement, so we have two of them. So basically, we have the stuff that's in the middle of the two inequalities, and then we have something on both ends. So remember, this only is true when you have two inequalities in one sentence, right? And this is called a compound and, but we call it a between style. So we want to eventually just get x in the middle. That's our goal. So we're going to undo our algebra. We're going to subtract 1 from the middle. So therefore, we must subtract 1 from both ends. And that gives us 1 is less than 5x is less than 13, right? Because that's a 0 and leaves 5x in the middle. Then we're going to divide by 5 in the middle. So we have to divide by 5 on both ends. So that leaves us 1/5, because 5 doesn't go into 1 evenly. And 5 goes into 13. That doesn't go in evenly, so we'll leave it as 13/5. So that's how you solve a one that's in the middle. Let's try another one. Here is another example where we have a between style of and, where we are working with two different inequalities. So this is really two inequalities. Again, technically, you could separate it as two separate inequalities and solve them both. And you have to use the word and then x divided by 4 minus 2 is less or equal to 3, and then solve both of those. But that's a lot of work, and we will not allow that. we want you to learn how to solve a between style and without breaking it apart. So draw some dotted lines in between the inequalities. And then remember you got your middle and you got your ends. And whatever you do to the middle, you need to do to both ends. So we're basically just solving two inequalities simultaneously. So we're going to undo subtracting 2 by adding 2 first. Therefore, you have to add 2 to both ends. That gives us -4 on the first end. That leaves us just x divided by 4 in the middle. And 3 plus 2 is 5 on the other end. And then if you're dividing by 4, then don't we need to multiply by 4 to get x by itself? So if you multiplied the middle by 4, you must multiply both ends by 4. So that gives us -16 on this end. And don't the 4's cancel out and leave us just an x in the middle? And 5 times 4 is 20. So this is your answer. And so what that means is we want all the numbers that are between -16 and 20. So we want all the numbers that are in between -16 and 20. And because they're equal to symbols underneath there, we're including -16 and we're including 20. So this is known as a between statement. We're talking about the numbers that are between -16 and 20. Let's try a couple more. Why don't you maybe try the next one? Okay, here we've got one that is separated with an and. So we're going to first solve this one using our algebra skills. And then once we're done, then we'll solve this one using our algebra skills. So in the first one, don't we have to undo adding 2 first by subtracting 2? Isn't a +2 and a -2 0 out? And leaves you n is greater than a -8. And then remember that means you're multiplying by -1. So we're going to divide out the -1. And remember, because you multiply or divide by a negative number, you got to remember the reverse rule. It says you must reverse the inequality. And then a -8 divided by a -1 is 8. Got to bring down that word and. That's part of your answer. And then remember, if you're multiplying by 3, don't you have to divide both sides by 3? And we divided by a positive. So because we divided by a positive, we do not reverse. The inequality stays exactly where it's at. It has nothing to do with the fact that this is a negative. It's what are you dividing by, and we're dividing by a positive. So we do not use the reverse rule. And this is your answer. So we want all the numbers, right? +8 goes over on the right-hand side, -4, 0's in here somewhere. We want all the numbers that are smaller than 8 and at the same time greater than -4. So we're talking about the numbers that are in between -4 and 8. Okay, let's try one more. Okay, maybe you could pause this one and try it yourself. So again, this one is the style where we have, this is a between style that is an and, but it's a between, and it's where we're going to solve both of them, 2 of them simultaneously. So we're going to maybe draw some dashed lines down the inequalities. And remember, you got your middle and you got your 2 ends. So we want to undo adding 1 first, so we want to subtract 1. And therefore, whatever you do to middle, you need to make sure that you do the same thing to both ends. So that gives me a -12. That zeroes out, leaves me a -2n in the middle. And -5 and -1 is a -6. Then don't we have to undo multiplying by a -2? And we undo multiplication by dividing by a -2 to the middle and to both ends, because remember, we are solving 2 inequalities at the same time. So we are actually solving two inequalities simultaneously. And didn't we just divide by a negative number? So if you divide or multiply by a negative number, don't you have to use the reverse rule? So don't we need to reverse this from less than to a greater than, and from a less than to a greater than? Negative 12 divided by negative 2 is a 6. This leaves you just n in the middle. And negative 6 divided by negative 2 is a 3. Now we're going to rewrite this because we always like to write the smaller number on the left-hand side like a number line, and the bigger number goes on the right. And notice the arrow is pointing to the 3, and the arrow is pointing towards the n. So this is your answer written appropriately, where the smaller number should always go on the left like a number line, and the bigger number should always go on the right on a number line. So this says we want all the values that are between 3 and 6. That's what this means. It's a between statement. So we want all the numbers that are between 3 and 6. So it's all the numbers that are in between. So today we went over